It's great to see that films about ghosts and hauntings are still being made. Sure, there's the Insidious and Conjuring films, but a good old-fashioned ghost story doesn't need a blockbuster budget to be good. Take these two films, for example. This is M.L. Miller Fright's Best in Horror Countdown 2022 through 2023, counting down the best in horror within the window of October 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023.
Number 17.
Brooklyn 45 was released on June 9th, 2023. It's streaming on Shudder. It's directed and written by Ted Geoghegan. It's December 27th, 1945, and Lieutenant Colonel Clive Hawk Hochstadter, played by Larry Fessenden, has recently suffered the loss of his wife by suicide. To help mourn his loss, he has invited a group of his closest friends: retired military interrogator Marlon Sheridan, played by A League of Their Own's Anne Ramsey, her politician husband who has never served a day in his life in the armed forces, Bob Sheridan, played by Ron E. Raines, Hawk's retired right-hand man, Major Archibald Stanton, played by the Rangers' Jeremy Holm, and Hawk's childhood friend and military lifer, Major Paul DeFranco, played by Ezra Buzzington. Once the pleasantries fade, Hawk reveals he has gathered this group of friends to hold a seance so he can summon the spirit of his dead wife and find out if she's burning in hell for committing suicide. Though it takes some convincing, Hawk persuades the group to participate in the seance, which proves to be all too effective. Director-writer Ted Geoghegan returns to the world of seance and the supernatural that he did so well in his first film, We Are Still Here, for Brooklyn 45. But apart from the seance being an integral part of the story, the two films are as different as night and day. As a fan of old-timey radio mystery and suspense shows, I was transfixed to every minute of Brooklyn 45, which unfolds like a stage play or even a radio play, as it utilizes, for the most part, a single location and relies heavily on the script. Now, this may sound boring to never leave a single room for the duration of the movie, but Geoghegan has a stellar cast of uber-talented people to make things interesting. Larry Fessenden has been the godfather of indie horror for quite some time. With his last memorable performance in Jacob's Wife, he proved he can still be the lead in a film. In Brooklyn 45, Fessenden is a powerhouse. He delivers a monologue attempting to convince his friends into partaking in the seance that few actors could pull off. As this actor ages, he looks more and more like a Jack Nicholson in his prime, and though he is a distinct performer in his own right, I couldn't help but feel that Fessenden has crossed over into a new era of his career with age. In Brooklyn 45, he commands every scene he's in and bounces off the other actors amazingly well. Having seen Fessenden in minor roles in other indie horror films, I love it that Geoghegan is giving him such meaty and pivotal roles in his own films. The rest of the cast is marvelous as well, with the true standouts being Anne Ramsey and Jeremy Holm. Ramsey offers up both the empathetic role, but also has a dangerous side underneath that made her the best interrogator, aka torturer, in the war. She shows heart, but there is a steel underneath that works so well to round out her character. And Jeremy Holm is wonderfully nuanced as Hawk's loyal soldier, conflicted with his own homosexuality in a time when that is definitely not something accepted in the military, much less society. But really, all of the actors feel lived in, as if the actors fully understand not only their roles, but the subtle nuances of a group of people who have been friends for a very long time. Rounding out the cast is Proxy's Christina Klebe, a German immigrant who becomes the focus of Nazi hysteria that was spreading the nation in the period of time this movie was set. Klebe's role is integral to the plot, and though her screen time is shorter, she makes quite an impact on the rest of the group. Geoghegan juggles multiple themes of nationalism, religion, suicide, paranoia, homophobia, sexism, ageism, and the depths one would go for a friend, and does so solely through script. I'm in awe at the complexity of the relationships between the characters and how Geoghegan is able to mix in these themes so effortlessly. While much relies on the actor's shoulders to realize these characters, it's Geoghegan who came up with them in the first place. This guy's got a gift for gab, as about 80% of this film's suspense comes from character interaction. The conversations are written sharp as tensions between the longtime friends, who are still very different people, rise to a fever pitch. Gyo again does a good job of offering up interesting angles, despite the single setting, making the film feel more expansive than it really is, but it's his writing talent that really shines here. If you need explosions and expansive effects sequences, Brooklyn 45 is not the type of movie for you. If I had to compare it to something, I think this would make a good double bill with Ti West's The Innkeepers. The supernatural effects used are well done, but used sparingly only when it services the plot. There's also more gore than I thought there would be, with one of the latter effects feeling a bit like overkill, if I'm going to be honest. Still, the gore is there to show how serious Hawk is about the seance, as well as to amplify the horror between the players. While there are quite a few graphic shocks and twists out of nowhere, it's the story and character that makes it all so special. You just don't get movies like this that are so profoundly themed, soundly structured, and deftly played, so be sure not to miss Brooklyn 45. This is a pretty low-budget film, and it's got all the trappings of a low-budget film. But I believe there hasn't been a film made in ages that has been able to recreate the gritty, grimy, grindhousey flavor of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre that this film right here has accomplished. And that's something to take note of. The Hopewell Haunting was released on June 13th, 2023. It's streaming on Tubi from Dark Sky Films. It's directed and written by Dane Sears. It's Kentucky, 1930, and a preacher, played by Ted Ferguson, is approached by a desperate family asking him to bless their house, which they feel is haunted by haints, aka unsettled ghosts. When the preacher arrives, things go from bad to worse as the house is indeed haunted and housing deep, dark secrets best left buried. Produced by two of my favorite filmmakers, Dwayne Graves and Justin Meeks, who were responsible for The Wild Man of the Navidad, Butcher Boys, and Killer Be Killed, The Hopewell Haunting starts out not like a haunted house movie, but a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. I'm not saying that there is a chainsaw-wielding maniac with a taste for faces, but the way the film is shot and the palpable atmosphere that permeates The Hopewell Haunting pays homage to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, more so than I've seen any film do so since The Wild Man of the Navidad, which was produced by the same people. In The Hopewell Haunting, you can feel the sticky country heat, the flies buzzing around the actors, and the insects providing their own natural soundtrack to the film. On top of that, there are scenes that feel worn down and made with an indie feel that conveys an unnatural tone. There are scenes focusing on the moon that open and close scenes, pans and zooms that are somewhat unsteady, all giving the film a renegade feel, as if this is something made outside of the mainstream and accepting it wholeheartedly. Like TCM, the violence in The Hopewell Haunting is only hinted at. The film opens with a scene of absolute horror as we as the audience only hear someone being assaulted in some way. While the violence is never shown, the sounds of screaming, struggle, and some kind of domestic terror is harrowing as the camera focuses on the decimated house that the events most likely occurred in sometime in the past. There are moments where the tormented ghost appears to the preacher, and those are effectively spooky as well, but it's these screams and the hints of violence that hit the hardest. The Hopewell Haunting is a slow burner. It basically is a story about a preacher going to a house 3 times, the third ending with a confrontation with a restless spirit which haunts the house. The ending feels somewhat wholesome and downright quaint. The acting is capable, but leaves a lot to be desired. But it's the feel of The Hopewell Haunting that really worked for me. Eventually, there will be another Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Usually, my biggest issue with these sequels is that while the chainsaws and Leatherface are there, the tone of the original is something no one seems to be able to harness. Well, the folks behind The Hopewell Haunting have harnessed the unharnessable. It's captured the dark, dank tone Tobe Hooper and company did so well back then and reframed it in an intimate story about a small-town haunting. From the standpoint of atmosphere and tone, The Hopewell Haunting is a true gem. As always, feel free to agree, disagree, or how about you play along at home and give me your own picks for your favorite horror movies. It's October, so let's talk horror. Come back tomorrow for the next level in the Best in Horror Countdown. Be sure to hit all of those pertinent bells and whistles down below, and you'll never miss a post. Happy Halloween, folks.